Koreans are always talking about nuclear plants, nuclear waste, and radiation. There's always a big headline in the newspaper talking about Japan dumping nuclear waste. However, behind the news articles and public hatred towards nuclear plants, the vast majority of Koreans don't even know why nuclear waste is dangerous.
I'm not really sure about what nuclear waste is.
I just think of it as like a neon green fluid that gets thrown into the ocean.
Because the property of the nuclear thing is very dangerous. I don't know what the exact reason, but I just heard that it's really, really dangerous.
To put it simply, nuclear plants output large atoms. These atoms are so large that they are unstable. Think of a really fat person like Kim Jong-un. As a result, they will break down into smaller particles over time. In this process, a tiny bit of mass changes into energy through Einstein's iconic E=mc². This energy is what people call radiation, and one may damage chemical bonds, such as those of the DNA. Given that people always rage about Japan dumping nuclear waste and how much nuclear plants are covered in the news, you would expect people to know why nuclear waste is harmful. Yet, the vast majority of Koreans are dangerously naive. This can lead to widespread conspiracy theories and disbelief in scientists and engineers, like how the public hates nuclear plants and anything nuclear without clear reason. Of course, these interviews are limited to SPPS students. They are still young and might have not had the chance to learn physics yet. But what if I tell you that the US government lost billions of dollars because of this precise reason? The SSC, or Superconducting Super Collider, was a multi-billion-dollar particle physics project meant to advance particle physics further and discover particles smaller than protons, neutrons, and electrons. One of the most likely potential sites was at Chicago, Fermilab. Fermilab was a particle physics lab that already had the largest collider to that point. The SSC could utilize the infrastructure and experienced scientists already working there, saving costs, which was crucial. Senators wouldn't vote on the project if it was too expensive. The only problem with Fermilab was that there was a very vocal movement against the SSC in Chicago. Activist groups claimed that there would be nuclear waste deposited in the area and people would die from cancer. This argument may seem compelling, but the SSC was a particle collider meant to smash tiny protons, electrons, neutrons, and etc. to generate smaller particles. This meant that the collider wouldn't produce any unstable, gigantic atoms. There was no need to worry about nuclear waste at all because there was no nuclear waste involved. However, the SSC had to be built on a different site in Texas due to the strong opposition. Within 5 years, the project was scrapped, wasting $2 billion of taxpayer money. The failure of the SSC was not solely due to the Texas location. For one part, the Cold War had ended, and the financial situation in the US was becoming worse, which incentivized Congress to terminate the expensive project. Another issue was the management. Military engineers and generals were given high positions in the project, and many talented scientists left the project due to constant conflict with these military personnel. The project showed slow progress with the remaining, less experienced scientists in the toxic work environment, driving the price up further. To sum it up, there were many circumstantial fallbacks that led to the eventual collapse of the SSC. The project could not have gone any unlucky. However, it is difficult to ignore thinking about what might have happened if Fermilab was chosen. If the SSC was built in Chicago, the cost savings might have just been enough to keep the project afloat. If it was in Chicago, there was a pre-established hierarchy that would have prevented the problem of the toxic work environment. Because of a vocal movement of the dumb, uneducated masses, the government had wasted a bunch of money and particle physics was held back. Or was it the opposite? Was the particle physicist at fault? Perhaps the overarching reason for the SSC's failure was not the Cold War ending, not the financial situation, and not the toxic work environment, but how it was presented to the politicians and to the public. The scientists presented the SSC as a construction job, lab job maker, a boost to the economy, not a science project to advance particle physics. They presented it as a way to assert American dominance over other countries. Because of this, senators whose state wasn't given a factory for the project grew bitter. All they saw in it was jobs, not science. For them, the American dominance factor was the only reason to keep the project afloat. But when the Cold War ended, there was no reason for the senators to vote for it at all. The ill-informed public protesting made the situation worse, as senators started to side against the SSC. The scientists failed to persuade the politicians about the SSC's scientific value. The scientists failed to educate the public about the non-nuclear wastiness of the project. They jeopardized their own study. But they didn't have to.
수금지와 목토천에
수성,
Venus,
지구,
Mars, Jupiter.
토성, 천왕성, 해왕성. 3 types of radioactive decay. I don't know about like this thing very well.
Excuse me?
I'm not sure.
3 types of radioactive? Sorry, I don't know.
The 3 types of radioactive decay are alpha, beta, and gamma decays. These are 2 equally simple questions in 2 different fields of physics, astrophysics and nuclear physics. Yet the results are strikingly different. Somehow, the average Korean student knows way more about basic astrophysics than nuclear physics, even though the subject more relevant to Korea is nuclear physics. How about recent breakthroughs in the field?
I think it'll be pretty successful. Wasn't it the Falcon 9? So it will be effective as in you will save a lot of money. They will save a lot of money because they don't have to like recreate the rocket.
No? Are you there?
Heard of it. I don't know what it is exactly, but I've heard of it.
The astrophysicists, unlike the nuclear and particle physicists, were doing a great job in convincing people about how cool their subject is and at educating the public. Their reward was the moon race and the consequent advancement of the field. At the core, scientists are not terrible educators, nor are they terrible communicators. The nuclear and particle physicists were simply ignorant. When they talked to the politicians, they didn't tell them the actual science because they thought they would never understand. They never tried to put subatomic particles into middle school textbooks or teach them about different alpha, beta, and gamma decays. This led to collateral damage, a failed multi-billion-dollar project, a major setback in the field, the loss of public interest and support. It led to people not understanding what nuclear energy even is, and people shying away from anything and everything with the word nuclear. But look at the astrophysicists. These scientists showed politicians what astrophysics truly was. They worked hard to educate the public, and it worked. With the right visualizations, the right similes, and the right pictures and stories, the public can also see what the scientists see. Perhaps not as deeply and precisely as the scientists see, but they will at least understand the big picture. They'll know why their tax money should be used towards the project. Now, imagine what could have happened if the particle physicists understood the importance of communication. When the space race started, there was no clear benefit for the average person. However, thanks to the astrophysicists and their strive to communicate with the public, we now have GPS technology. We have Wi-Fi in planes and other remote places where traditional cell towers can't be used. Now we have a way to survive asteroids. These technologies changed our lives permanently and for the better. The same could have happened thanks to the SSC. Many STEM students wanting to become scientists put communication skills aside and question why they even have to take English courses at school. So did the nuclear physicists and the particle physicists. However, scientists need to learn to communicate in order to advance their field and to advance humanity as a whole. Absolutely nothing great can be done in this world without communicating it. The zeroed law of science is communication.